Welcome to part 1 of the voiceover lecture for Chapter 7, The Nervous System. Today, you may have woke up from a dream. You may have awoken to the blaring of your alarm. You got out of bed, felt the cold floor beneath your feet. You're hungry and you decide to make breakfast. And then you realize you're going to be late for work and you panic. This little story might describe experiences you've had in the past, experiences that would not be possible without the nervous system. It can't be overstated how important the nervous system is. Any and all sensations you feel, the sound of my voice, the feel of the mouse in your hand, all of the thoughts and memories you might be having now, your desires, your needs, the movement of your body, all of these things rely on your nervous system. But how does all of this work? Let's explore the inner workings of the nervous system. I've divided Chapter 7 into 6 sections. In Section 1, we'll go over a broad overview of the nervous system. In Section 2, we'll discuss the nervous system in terms of its tissue. Section 3, we'll talk about the physiology of neurons, especially the action potential. In Section 4, we'll talk about the spinal cord and spinal nerves. Section 5, we'll talk about reflexes. And in Section 6, we'll explore the brain and the cranial nerves. Section 1, an overview of the nervous system. The functional unit of the nervous system is a cell type called the neuron, or nerve cell. We have billions of neurons in our body. Neurology is the study of the normal functions and disorders of the nervous system. A neurologist is someone who treats the nervous system medically, whereas a neuroscientist is a person who studies the nervous system in a laboratory setting. A nerve is a bundle of hundreds to thousands of neurons and the cells that support those neurons. We have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. These are the nerves that originate from the brain. And we have 31 pairs of spinal nerves. These are the nerves that originate in the spinal cord. To make the study of the nervous system a little easier, we divide the nervous system into different categories. We divide the nervous system based on the cell types, functions, and organs involved. The nervous system can be divided into 2 major divisions. That's the central nervous system, or CNS, which includes our brain and spinal cord. The second major division is the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. The peripheral nervous system includes cranial nerves, spinal nerves, and all the neurons and sensory receptors that are outside of the central nervous system. So any of the sensory receptors in our skin, our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our ears, those are all part of the peripheral nervous system. Here's an overview of the nervous system. Here we have the brain and spinal cord, which are part of the central nervous system, and then all of the spinal nerves branching out of the spinal cord, and cranial nerves coming out of the brain, and the sensory receptors in the skin, and the plexuses, including those found around our gastrointestinal tract. Those are all part of the peripheral nervous system. This picture also depicts the 2 major divisions of the nervous system. That is the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is subdivided into 2 major divisions. Number 1, the afferent division, or sensory division, and the efferent division, or motor division. Note, both terms are derived from French terms which were originally derived from Latin. Afferent comes from adferens, which means carrying into. This is why this is the sensory division. It brings information into the nervous system, versus the efferent or exferens, which means to carry away, and this brings information from the nervous system to our various organs. So the efferent division would control our muscles and glands. The afferent or sensory division of the peripheral nervous system includes sensory neurons. These are neurons that pick up on sensations like touch, tickle, itch, sight, sound, taste. The afferent division conveys that information to the central nervous system. Again, some examples include pain and smell. Contrast that with the efferent or motor division of the peripheral nervous system, which sends information out from the central nervous system and controls different parts of our body. The efferent or motor division is further subdivided, including A, the somatic nervous system, which conveys information outward towards our skeletal muscles. The somatic nervous system is voluntary. We can consciously control it. So think when you flex your biceps or the muscles in your hand. The second major division of the efferent or motor division is the autonomic nervous system, or ANS. Unlike the somatic nervous system, the ANS is not voluntarily or consciously controlled. And this includes output to our smooth and cardiac muscles. It also includes output or control over our glands. Again, the ANS is involuntary. And the ANS is further divided into three branches. That is the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric nervous systems. Again, the autonomic nervous system is subdivided into three branches. The first branch is the sympathetic nervous system, which controls our fight or flight response. This system is activated when you feel threatened, scared, or nervous. You may find your heart rate increasing, your breath becoming deeper and more rapid. Your pupils will dilate and your skin becomes cold and clammy as blood is diverted to your skeletal muscles. These responses are thought to help animals survive during life-threatening situations, where the most energy is needed in your skeletal muscles to help you escape a predator or to fight for survival. The second branch of the ANS is the parasympathetic nervous system, which controls our rest and digest response. This is active when you are at rest and not threatened in any way. Your body is concerned with conserving energy and digestion. Your heart rate and breathing are all normal. Finally, the third branch is called the enteric nervous system and provides a more nuanced control over your digestive tract. The submucosal plexus controls the glands of the digestive system. For example, it triggers your stomach to release gastric acid when you eat a meal. The myenteric plexus controls the smooth muscles that envelop the digestive tract. These muscles help push food forward as it is digested and absorbed, and the remnants are expelled. Let's describe a few other structures that are found in our nervous system. A plexus is a specific network of nerves. A plexus is shaped like a net. This is when nerves merge and branch from each other. A plexus will control specific areas of the body. For example, the brachial plexus innervates the arm and helps controls the muscles that are found in our arm. The solar plexus, which is called the celiac plexus, is in the abdomen behind the stomach. People usually refer to it when getting punched in the stomach. A ganglia is a group of cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. Remember that a neuron is composed of projections, the axon and dendrites, but also includes the soma or cell body. The soma or cell body is a larger part of the neuron. When the cell bodies of a neuron or various neurons are grouped together, they form a bulge in a nerve, and that's called the ganglia. For example, we have sensory neuron cell bodies in our nervous system. And then finally, a nuclei is a lot like a ganglia. It's a group of cell bodies, but instead of in the peripheral nervous system, nuclei are found in our central nervous system. Section 2, Nervous Tissue. Before we discuss the inner workings of the nervous system, we need to discuss the fundamental tissue that the nervous system is composed of. That is nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is composed of two cell types, The functional unit of the nervous system is the neuron. Neurons are the cells that transmit electrical signals. The other cell type is called glial cells. Glial cells are there to support the neurons. Let's begin by discussing the parts of the neuron. Neurons have roughly 9 parts that you need to know for this course. The soma, or cell body, the dendrites, axon, the axon hillock, the initial segment, which is found in the axon hillock, axon collaterals, the axon terminal, myelin sheath, and synapses. This slide is meant to give you the opportunity to practice labeling the various parts of a neuron. In the next slide, we'll go over those parts. Here we have a neuron with all of its parts labeled. This bigger, more voluminous part of the cell, which contains the nucleus and most of the organelles, is called the cell body or soma. Remember, the term soma means body. Coming from the cell body, you can see many different projections or processes. The shorter, more numerous processes are called dendrites. Dendrites are the projections that receive signals from other cells. The singular long process shown here to the right is the axon. Axons are the cell processes that send signals out to other cells. You can see this axon has a branch on it. Branches of the axon are called axon collaterals. And the part of the cell where the axon and soma meet, where the cell tapers off into the axon, that region there is called the axon hillock. Within the axon hillock is a region called the initial segment, which we'll discuss later, but this is where an action potential or the electrical signal begins. All along the axon, these purple globs are part of the myelin sheath, the fatty layer that insulates the axon. And the tips of the axon are called axon terminals. On the next slide, we'll show you what a synapse looks like. The term synapse literally means a union between two different elements. This is appropriate in the nervous system because a synapse is where two neurons, or a neuron and its target cell, come very close for neuronal communication. Here's a drawing of two neurons. The cell on the left is sending a signal to the cell on the right. The tiny space between the two cells, the space between the axon terminal of the signaling cell and the dendrite of the target cell, is the synapse, or sometimes called the synaptic cleft. The signaling neuron is said to be presynaptic because it occurs before the synapse, and the target cell is postsynaptic because it occurs after the synapse. This slide is simply a written review of the terms we discussed on the previous slides. Here's a picture of a real motor neuron stained and prepared for viewing under a microscope. You can see the cell body, or soma, in this area here, with the nucleus indicated with this arrow. You can see the single long projection down to the right, that's the axon, and then the numerous dendrites to the upper left. You can also see some of the supporting cells, neuroglial cells they're called, indicated with the small nuclei surrounding the neuron. Neurons can be classified by both their function and the number of processes that emerge from the soma. Unipolar sensory neurons are neurons that transmit normal sensation from receptors, like those in the skin, to the central nervous system. Bipolar neurons also transmit sensory information, but exclusively special senses. Those are the senses that are mainly found in our head, like sight and smell. Finally, motor neurons, or multipolar neurons, send signals outward from the central nervous system to other structures like our muscles or glands. These are the neurons that allow you to move your arms. Motor neurons can be up to 1 meter in length. Here we can see the 3 different categories of neurons. Remember that the names given to these categories are based on the number of projections or processes that arise from the soma or body of the cell. In multipolar neurons, we have many projections that all come out of a single cell body. So you can see there are many dendrites on this cell and a single axon. But overall, there are many projections leaving the soma. Remember, multipolar neurons are also called motor neurons. Here in the middle, we have bipolar neurons, which are involved in our special senses. We have one cell body here with only two projections that arise from that cell body. An axon coming down to the bottom, and then a single projection that splits into many dendrites up at the top. And then finally we have unipolar neurons, which are involved in the normal senses. Here you can see the cell body, and arising from that cell body is just a single projection or process. Now that process will split into axons and dendrites. Unipolar neurons were involved in normal sensations. Remember, nervous tissue is not composed solely of just neurons. There are supporting cells called neuroglia. So neuroglia are the cells that support neurons in the central and peripheral nervous systems. I've grouped these different neuroglia based on their functions. In group 1, we have the oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells. Both of these cell types produce the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is a fatty layer that helps insulate our axons. Oligodendrocytes are found exclusively in the central nervous system, that is the brain and spinal cord, while Schwann cells are found in our peripheral nervous system. In the next group, we have astrocytes and satellite cells. These are cells that help maintain the ion concentration around our neurons. They also provide nutrients to the neurons. Astrocytes are found exclusively in the central nervous system, while satellite cells are found in the peripheral nervous system. I like to call these the space cells. Thirdly, we have microglia. Microglia are immune cells that are found in the brain and spinal cord. In other words, they're only found in our central nervous system. They help fight infections. And finally, we have ependymal cells. These are cells that produce a special fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid helps protect and nourish our brain and spinal cord. Ependymal cells are found exclusively in the central nervous system. This picture represents the central nervous system. In the picture, you can see several neurons, kind of a yellowish color. These appear to be multipolar or motor neurons in that they have many extensions coming out of them. The neurons are being fed by the neighboring astrocytes. Remember, these help maintain the ion concentration around the neurons and help give them nutrients. So where do the astrocytes get their nutrients from? From neighboring blood vessels or capillaries. You can also see there are microglia in the central nervous system. They crawl around and gobble up infectious bacteria or viruses. And then we have oligodendrocytes. These are the type of cell that produces the myelin sheath in the central nervous system. Now, what makes them different from Schwann cells is that you have a single cell that produces many projections or processes, like these tentacle-like structures that stick out and wrap around the axons of neighboring neurons. And it's that structure that produces the myelin sheath in our central nervous system. And then finally we have ependymal cells. Ependymal cells are the cells that produce the cerebrospinal fluid. Here we have a depiction of the peripheral nervous system. The yellow cell is the neuron, and you can see it's being covered by two different types of kind of pinkish colored cells. The cells that are coming in contact with the cell body are satellite cells. Remember, it was the satellite cells that help feed the neurons and maintain the ion concentration in the peripheral nervous system. Also depicted are Schwann cells. These are the cells that produce the myelin sheath that wrap around the axons of neurons in the peripheral nervous system. Notice the difference between the Schwann cells from the previously mentioned oligodendrocytes. Schwann cells you have a single cell that wraps its entire structure around the axon. And so one axon will have many Schwann cells wrapped around it. Again, this is in the peripheral nervous system. Now it's time for a few review questions to see what you've learned. Number 1. Which of the following is the structure of a neuron that sends out signals? Is it a dendrite, the soma, myelin sheath, or axon? Question number 2. The type of neuron that triggers muscles to contract or glands to release their contents are blank. Is it motor neurons, unipolar neurons, sensory neurons, or bipolar neurons? And finally, question 3. Which type of glial cell produces myelin in the central nervous system? Is it astrocytes, Schwann cells, oligodendrocytes, or satellite cells? And that concludes part 1 of our voiceover lecture for Chapter 7, the nervous system. Stay tuned for part 2.